I lost my baby 6 weeks ago. Can I breastfeed him?
Korean Mafia boss. Damon's baby screamed non-stop on the first-class flight. 8 hours without food, every bottle rejected, passengers complaining, flight attendants helpless. When Eritrean nurse Sanara made an offer that changed everything. I lost my baby 6 weeks ago. My body still makes milk. Can I breastfeed him? 3 months later, she's living in the apartment Daemin bought her, caring for baby Juwon, who won't let anyone else touch him, falling dangerously in love with the criminal boss whose violent world she swore to avoid. But when his abandoned ex-wife, Bora, returns demanding her family back with blackmail evidence that could destroy Damon's empire, and his cold mother arrives from Korea, calling Sanara inappropriate and just the help. The nurse who sacrificed her grief to save a stranger's baby receives an anonymous video of her kissing Damon with a brutal ultimatum. Leave him in 24 hours, or the footage goes to his enemies and business associates, endangering both father and son forever. Before we continue, can I ask you a question? Where in the world are you watching from? Comment below, because we'd love to know how far these stories travel, and hit the subscribe button, because it helps us create more heartwarming stories. The baby's screams pierced through the quiet hum of the first-class cabin like a siren that wouldn't quit. Dom and Choi had tried everything. The bottle sat untouched on the tray table. The pacifier lay rejected on the empty seat beside him. Even the expensive noise-canceling headphones he'd placed over his son's tiny ears had been swatted away by flailing infant fists. Juwon's face had turned an alarming shade of red, his small body arching in distress as passengers shot dirty looks in their direction. A businessman 2 rows ahead slammed his laptop shut with obvious irritation. The flight attendant hovered nearby, her smile strained, as she offered yet another suggestion Damon had already tried. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool air conditioning. 3 months. He'd been doing this alone for 3 months, since Bora walked out without explanation, leaving only a note that said she couldn't do it anymore. No forwarding address, no phone number. Just gone, as if their son meant nothing to her at all. The first few weeks, Damon had managed with nannies, but none of them lasted. Juwon rejected them all, crying until his voice went hoarse. Now, exhausted from sleepless nights and drowning in business obligations he couldn't ignore, Damien found himself on this flight to New York with a screaming infant and absolutely no idea what to do. Across the aisle, a woman had been watching. Damien noticed her from the corner of his eye, and his jaw tightened. Just another judgmental stranger who thought she could do better. He'd seen that look 100 times in the past 3 months. But when she stood and moved toward him, something in her expression made him pause. Her eyes held no judgment. Instead, they reflected a deep sadness mixed with understanding that seemed to reach right through his frustration. She was beautiful in a way that caught him off guard. Her skin was the rich brown of polished mahogany, and her dark eyes held a warmth that seemed at odds with the clinical compassion he'd seen from nurses and nannies. She wore simple clothes, jeans, and a loose sweater, but carried herself with quiet dignity. "Excuse me." Her voice was soft, accented in a way he couldn't immediately place. "I don't mean to intrude, but I'm a nurse. May I look at him?" Damon wanted to refuse. Pride demanded he handle this himself. But Juwon's cries had taken on a desperate edge that frightened him. He shifted slightly, allowing her closer. She leaned in, ignoring the baby's flailing arms, and gently pressed her fingertips to Juwon's cheeks, his belly, checking with practiced efficiency. Her brow furrowed. "When did he last eat?" "He won't take the bottle. I've tried 6 times since we boarded." "Before that?" Damon's throat tightened. "This morning. Maybe 8 hours ago." Her eyes widened slightly. He's hungry. Starving, actually. Sometimes babies refuse bottles when they're stressed or can sense their parents' anxiety. She paused, her next words coming slower, more carefully. I know this is unusual, but I lost my baby 6 weeks ago. My body still makes milk. I could feed him if you're comfortable with that. The offer hung in the air between them like something fragile and impossible. Damon stared at her, certain he'd misheard. Around them, other passengers had started to complain more loudly. Someone called for the flight attendant. A woman behind them muttered about people who shouldn't travel with infants if they couldn't control them. Juwon's screams reached a new pitch, his little face scrunched in misery. You're serious? Completely. I understand if you think it's strange. But that baby is hungry, and I can help him. That's all that matters right now. There was no judgment in her voice, no pity, just a simple statement of fact, delivered with such calm certainty that something in Damon's chest loosened. He looked down at his son's tear-stained face, at the way Juwon's tiny hands grabbed at nothing, searching for comfort he couldn't provide. The bathroom area. There's more privacy there. She nodded and stood, waiting while Damon gathered Juwon's blanket. His hands shook slightly as he lifted his son, following this stranger toward the back of the plane. The flight attendant started to object, but something in Damon's expression made her step aside. In the small area near the bathrooms, partially shielded from view by a curtain, she took Juwon from his arms. The baby continued crying, but she simply held him close, murmuring something in a language Damon didn't recognize. Her voice had a musical quality, rising and falling in a soothing rhythm. Then she adjusted her sweater and brought Juwon to her chest. The baby latched on, immediately, and the sudden silence felt like a physical thing. Damon watched in stunned amazement as his son's little fists unclenched, his body relaxing completely for the first time in days. The woman looked down at Juwon with an expression so full of longing and love that Damon had to look away, feeling like he was intruding on something sacred. Her hand cradled the baby's head with infinite gentleness, and he noticed her eyes had filled with tears, that she blinked back quickly. "What's your name?" The question came out rougher than he intended. "Sonara." She didn't look up, her attention focused on the baby in her arms. "From Eritrea originally." "Damien. And this is Juwon." "Hello, little Juwon." She smiled down at the baby, who had closed his eyes in contentment. "You were so hungry, weren't you? It's okay now." They stood in awkward silence, the sounds of the plane a distant hum around them. Damien couldn't take his eyes off the scene before him, this stranger holding his son with more natural maternal instinct than Bora had ever shown in 6 months of motherhood. The thought brought a familiar bitterness, but he pushed it down. "Your wife?" Sonara's voice was gentle, but the question still stung. "Gone. 3 months ago. She left us both. I'm sorry." And the way she said it, he knew she meant it. That must be incredibly difficult. "We're managing." The lie felt hollow even to his own ears. Sonara glanced up at him, and in her eyes he saw she knew it was a lie, but she didn't call him on it. Instead, she looked back down at Juwon, who had fallen into the peaceful sleep of a well-fed, content infant. "He's beautiful. You're lucky to have him." Something in her voice, that deep undercurrent of grief, made Damon's throat tighten. "What happened? To your baby?" "Born too early, lived for 3 hours." She said it simply, but he heard the ocean of pain beneath those words. "Coming back from the funeral when I boarded this flight." The revelation hit him like a physical blow. This woman, drowning in her own grief, had reached out to help his son anyway, had offered the milk meant for her own child to comfort a stranger's baby. The generosity of it, the raw courage it must have taken, left him speechless. "Sonara, I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to." Holding him helps me too. She adjusted the blanket around Ju-won's sleeping form. We should get back to our seats. He'll sleep for a while now. They returned to their seats, and true to her word, Ju-won slept peacefully for the rest of the flight. But Damon couldn't sleep. He kept glancing across the aisle at the woman who'd saved his sanity and possibly his son's health with one act of incredible kindness. As the plane began its descent into New York, he made a decision. Reaching into his jacket pocket, he pulled out a business card and leaned across the aisle. I know this is forward, but could I have your number? In case Ju-won needs help again. I'll pay you, of course, whatever you think is fair. Sonara hesitated, her fingers toying with the card. I'm not sure that's a good idea. Please. You saw how he responded to you. I have meetings all week, and I can't take him if he's going to scream the entire time. You're a nurse. You understand babies. And clearly, Ju-won feels safe with you. The practical appeal worked where emotional pleading might not have. She took the card, then pulled out her phone. Just for the baby, if he needs help. They exchanged numbers as the plane touched down. When they stood to deplane, Damon noticed the men waiting near the gate. His security team, dressed in dark suits that screamed danger to anyone paying attention. He saw Sonara notice them too, saw the way her expression shifted from warm to wary in an instant. She knew. Somehow she'd figured out that he wasn't just a regular businessman struggling with single fatherhood. The realization should have made him relieved that she'd probably never call. Instead, it filled him with an unexpected sense of loss. But as they parted ways in the terminal, Sonara looked back once. Their eyes met across the crowd, and something passed between them. A connection forged in crisis, fragile but real. Damon watched her disappear into the crowd, Ju-won sleeping peacefully against his chest, and knew with absolute certainty that this wouldn't be the last time he saw Sonara. He just didn't know yet how completely she would change his life. 2 days later, Damon stood outside a modest apartment building in Queens, feeling ridiculous and determined in equal measure. Ju-won fussed in his arms, working himself up to another crying fit, despite the 3 nannies Damon had fired in the past 48 hours. None of them could calm his son the way Sonara had. He'd gotten her address through methods he preferred not to examine too closely. His head of security, Juan, had given him a long look when he'd made the request, but hadn't asked questions. That was why Damon trusted him. The building was clean but clearly old, with paint peeling around the windows and a front door that stuck when he pulled it open. The contrast to his own glass and steel penthouse couldn't have been sharper. He climbed 3 flights of stairs, ignoring the curious looks from a neighbor, and knocked on apartment 3C. Sonara opened the door in scrubs, clearly just home from a shift. Surprise flashed across her face, followed quickly by concern as she saw Ju-won's distressed state. How did you find where I live? Does it matter? He needs you. For a moment, he thought she might slam the door in his face. Her jaw tightened, and wariness filled her eyes. But then Ju-won let out a particularly pitiful cry, and her expression softened. Come in. But after I help him, we need to talk about boundaries. The apartment was tiny, maybe a quarter the size of his bedroom, but she'd made it warm. Colorful fabrics draped over the worn furniture, and photographs of smiling people covered one wall. The scent of spices hung in the air, exotic and inviting. Sonara took Ju-won without asking, and the baby immediately began to calm. She settled into a chair and began feeding him, that same look of mingled joy and sorrow crossing her face. You can't just show up at my home unannounced. It's not appropriate. I know, but I have a proposition for you. She raised an eyebrow, waiting. I want to hire you as Ju-won's nanny, full-time. I'll pay you 3 times what you make at the hospital. I'm a registered nurse, not a nanny. And my son needs a nurse. He needs you specifically. Damien moved closer, careful not to crowd her. You saw what happened on the plane. He connects with you in a way he doesn't with anyone else. Please, name your price. It's not about money. Then what is it about? Sonara looked down at the baby in her arms. You're involved in something dangerous. Those men at the airport weren't regular security, and the way you found my address tells me you have resources that regular businessmen don't have. There was no point in lying. She was clearly intelligent enough to see through whatever story he concocted. You're right. My business interests include things that aren't entirely legal, but I would never let anything happen to you or Juwan. You'd be protected. That's supposed to make me feel better? It's supposed to be honest. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration and desperation warring inside him. Look, I'm not a good man. I won't pretend to be. But I love my son more than anything in this world, and he needs you. So yes, I'm asking you to take a risk, but I swear on everything I have that you'll be safe. The apartment fell silent except for Juwan's small sounds as he fed. Sonara studied Damon's face, searching for something he hoped she'd find. I have conditions. I live in my own place, not your home. I work set hours, and if I ever feel unsafe, I walk away with no interference from you. Deal. Except the apartment. I'll arrange something better than this in a safer neighborhood. Consider it part of the compensation package. I like my apartment. It's in a building with broken security and a front door that doesn't lock properly. You're not staying here. The words came out harsher than intended, but he didn't take them back. They stared at each other, wills clashing. Finally, Sonara sighed. Fine. But I pick the neighborhood. Agreed. 3 days later, Sonara stood in a beautiful apartment in Manhattan, just 10 minutes from Damon's penthouse. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, and the kitchen alone was bigger than her entire previous apartment. The guilt of accepting it warred with the practical knowledge that she desperately needed this job and this space. Her first day officially working for Damon felt surreal. His penthouse was exactly what she'd expected, all modern lines and expensive furnishings that looked like they belonged in a museum. But it felt cold, devoid of the warmth a home with a baby should have. She set about changing that immediately. Colorful toys appeared in the sterile living room. She moved Juwan's crib near a window where he could see the sky. And she filled the space with music, singing the songs her own mother had sung to her as she cared for the baby. Juwan thrived under her attention. Within a week, he was sleeping through the night and laughing during the day. He reached for her when she arrived each morning, his face lighting up with pure joy that made her heart ache and sing simultaneously. Diamond noticed. How could he not? He started coming home earlier from whatever mysterious business kept him out until late. At first, he'd simply watch from doorways as she played with Juwan. Then he began joining them, sitting on the floor while she encouraged the baby to roll over, sharing small smiles when Juwan succeeded. Dinners became a routine. Sonara would cook after Juwan went to sleep, unable to help herself when she saw the takeout containers that made up Damon's usual meals. The first time she made zigni, the rich Eritrean stew filling his kitchen with incredible aromas, he'd stood in the doorway looking completely stunned. You didn't have to do this. I was cooking for myself anyway. Seemed silly not to make enough for two. The lie was transparent, but he didn't call her on it. Instead, he'd sat across from her at the massive dining table, and they'd talked. Really talked. About everything except his business and her grief. They discovered a shared love of old movies and argued playfully about whether Korean or East African food was superior. He made her laugh with dry observations about his business associates, and she teased him about his terrible attempts at singing lullabies to Juwan. One evening, 3 weeks into her employment, everything shifted. Damon came home with blood on his shirt collar, trying to hide it by keeping his jacket on. But Sonara had been a nurse too long to miss the signs. She'd seen the tight way he held himself, the careful movements that spoke of injury. "Take off your jacket." "It's nothing." "Damien, take it off or I'm leaving right now." The threat worked. He shrugged out of the jacket, revealing a shirt stained with blood at the shoulder. She approached him carefully, her nurse's instincts overriding everything else. "Sit down. Let me see." "It's just a graze. I've already had it cleaned." But she was already unbuttoning his shirt, pushing it off his shoulders to reveal the bandage. Someone had done a decent job, but she could see it needed to be changed. She fetched her medical bag from where she kept it for Juwon and set about rewrapping the wound with professional efficiency. Her hands trembled slightly as she worked, not from fear of the injury, but from the proximity to him, the warmth of his skin under her fingers, the way his eyes never left her face. "Tell me the truth. All of it." So he did. About his family's business, started legitimately, but corrupted over generations until the lines between legal and illegal blurred into nothing. About the obligations he couldn't escape, the enemies he'd inherited, along with his father's empire. About the violence that lurked at the edges of his carefully controlled world. "I'm trying to change things, make everything legitimate. But these things take time, and there are people who benefit from the way things are." "The person who did this?" "Someone who disagreed with the changes I'm implementing. It's handled now." Sonara finished with the bandage and sat back, but didn't move away. "You could have lied to me. You would have known, and you deserve the truth if you're going to stay in Juwon's life. In my life." The last two words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Her breath caught as he reached up, his fingers gentle as they traced the line of her jaw. The touch sent electricity through her entire body. "This is a bad idea." But even as she said it, she leaned into his touch. "Probably the worst I've ever had." His thumb brushed across her lower lip, and she shivered. "Tell me to stop." Instead, she closed the distance between them, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that felt like coming home and jumping off a cliff simultaneously. His arms came around her, careful of his injury, pulling her closer as the kiss deepened. She tasted coffee, and something uniquely him, addictive and dangerous. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, reality crashed back in. Sonara stood quickly, putting distance between them. "I should go. It's late." "Sonara, this can't happen again. You're my employer, and your life is too dangerous for me to get involved in." She grabbed her bag and fled, but she could feel his eyes on her all the way to the elevator. In the safety of her apartment, she touched her lips, still feeling the warmth of his kiss, and knew she was lying to herself. It would happen again. She wanted it to happen again, and that terrified her more than any amount of danger. The next morning, she arrived at his penthouse with her heart in her throat, unsure what to expect. But Damon greeted her normally, as if the kiss had never happened. They fell into their usual routine, caring for Juwon, preparing meals, talking as the baby slept. But the tension between them had shifted into something electric. Every accidental touch felt deliberate. Every shared glance lasted too long. The air itself seemed charged with possibility and restraint. A week after the kiss, late in the evening after another shared dinner, Damon walked her to the elevator. His hand caught hers as she pressed the button. "I can't stop thinking about you." "Damon, I know all the reasons this is complicated. I know you're scared, and you have every right to be. But I'm falling for you, Sonara. I need you to know that." The elevator arrived, the doors sliding open. She should step inside, should put distance between them before this went any further. Instead, she turned back to him, rising on her toes to press a quick kiss to his cheek. "I'm falling too. That's what scares me." Then she stepped into the elevator, watching his expression shift from surprise to hope as the doors closed between them. Her heart raced the entire ride down, her mind spinning with possibilities and fears in equal measure. She didn't see the woman watching from the shadows of the parking garage, didn't notice the camera that captured her leaving Damon's building, or the cold smile on Bora's face as she reviewed the footage. Damon's ex-wife had returned, and she had plans that would shatter the fragile happiness they'd started to build. The knock on the penthouse door came at 7 in the morning, too early for Sonara's usual arrival time. Damon opened it to find a woman he'd once promised to love forever, standing in the hallway with designer luggage and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Hello, Damon. Miss me?" Bora looked exactly as she had the day she left. Perfect hair, perfect makeup, perfect clothes that probably cost more than most people made in a month. But her eyes held a calculating coldness that he'd somehow missed during their brief marriage. "What are you doing here?" "Coming home. I made a mistake leaving. I want my family back." She pushed past him into the penthouse, her gaze sweeping over the space with obvious approval. "I see you've redecorated. Much warmer. Did you hire someone?" Before he could answer, Juwon's cry echoed from the nursery. Bora's expression flickered, something almost like distaste crossing her features, before she smoothed it away. "My baby. I've missed him so much." The lie was so blatant that Damien almost laughed, but he bit back the response and went to get his son, returning to find Bora examining family photos that Sonara had framed and placed around the room. Photos of him and Juwon, capturing moments of joy that Bora had never been part of. She reached for the baby, but Juwon took one look at her and screamed, turning his face into Damon's chest. Bora's eyes hardened. "He doesn't remember me. How sad. But we'll fix that now that I'm back." "You're not staying here." "Of course I am. I'm still your wife, Damon. We never divorced." The reminder hit like a slap. In the chaos of the past 3 months, he'd never gotten around to filing papers, too busy keeping his business together and learning to care for a baby alone. The oversight now felt catastrophic. "There's a guest house on the property. You can stay there while we sort this out. But Bora, make no mistake, we're getting divorced. What we had is over." "Is it? Or are you just confused because I left? It happens, darling. Postpartum depression is very real. But I've had treatment, and I'm ready to be a mother now." Her smile sharpened. "Unless there's another reason you want me gone. Someone new, perhaps." The way she said it, the knowing glint in her eye, made his blood run cold. But before he could respond, the elevator dinged, and Sonara stepped out, her usual warm smile freezing when she saw Bora. "I'm sorry. I didn't know you had company. I can come back later." "No need." Bora's voice dripped false sweetness. "You must be the nanny. How convenient that you're here. You can show me where you keep Juwon's things." Sonara's gaze flickered to Damon, questions, and something that looked like hurt swimming in her eyes. He wanted to explain, to pull her aside, and tell her this changed nothing. But with Bora watching like a hawk, he could only give her a slight shake of his head. The next 2 weeks were torture. Bora made Sonara's life miserable with 1,000 small cruelties. She criticized everything, from the way Sonara dressed Juwon to the food she prepared. She'd walk into rooms and fall silent, making it clear she'd been talking about Sonara before she arrived. She constantly reminded everyone that Sonara was just the help, not family, and certainly not important. Worse, Damon's mother arrived from Korea after Bora called her with exaggerated tales of her son's life falling apart. Hee-ja Choi was a force of nature, elegant and cold as winter frost. She took one look at the situation and made her opinions crystal clear. Sonara overheard the conversation from the hallway, frozen in place with Juan in her arms. "You're seriously considering this woman? An African nanny? What will people say?" "I don't care what people say." "Well, you should. Your business relationships depend on maintaining respect. How can you do that with someone so inappropriate on your arm? Bora is your wife, the mother of your child. She made a mistake, but she's back now. This is your chance to fix your family. Bora is not Juwan's mother. She never was. She abandoned us. And you've clearly been struggling without her. Look at this house, full of cheap decorations and smelling like foreign food. This is not how we live, Damon." Each word felt like a knife. Sonara looked down at Juwan, who gazed up at her with complete trust, and felt tears prick her eyes. She'd been foolish to think this could work. Foolish to imagine she could fit into Damon's world, or that his feelings for her could overcome the massive obstacles between them. That night, she started packing. Not just her things from the penthouse, but everything in her apartment. She'd leave the city entirely, go somewhere Damon's reach couldn't find her. It would hurt. God, it would destroy her to leave Juwan. But staying would only make everything worse. She'd nearly finished when her apartment door opened. She'd been too distracted to hear the lock, but suddenly Damon stood in her doorway, his eyes wild. "What are you doing?" "What I should have done weeks ago. Leaving." "No." He crossed the room in 3 strides, grabbing her hands. "You can't leave. Not now. I have to. Your mother is right. I don't fit in your world. Bora is your wife, and no matter what happened between you and me, that's reality. Bora means nothing to me. She never did. Not really. What I feel for you is real. It doesn't matter what we feel. Look at the situation clearly. You have a business to protect, a reputation to maintain. I'm just the nanny who got too close. You're everything." The words came out fierce, almost angry. "You brought life back into my home. You made Juwan smile. You made me remember what it feels like to want something beyond power and control. I can't lose that. I can't lose you. Damon, please don't make this harder." Instead of arguing further, he kissed her, not gentle or tentative like before, but desperate and demanding, his hands tangled in her hair, pulling her closer, as if he could make her stay through sheer force of will. And she kissed him back with equal desperation, knowing this was goodbye, even as every cell in her body screamed at her to stay. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, tears streamed down her face. "I love you." The confession fell from her lips like a secret she'd been holding too long. "I love you. And that's exactly why I have to go." His expression cracked, raw pain breaking through his usual control. "Then stay. Please. I'll fix this. I'll handle Bora and my mother and anyone else who tries to come between us." Some things can't be fixed. But even as she said it, he was pulling her close again. And this time, when they kissed, it turned into more. Clothes shed between desperate touches, whispered confessions against heated skin. They came together with an intensity born of need and fear of losing each other, creating a memory that would have to sustain them through whatever came next. Afterward, lying in his arms in her half-packed apartment, Sonara allowed herself one moment of perfect peace. One moment to memorize the feel of him beside her, the sound of his heartbeat, the way his hand traced lazy patterns on her shoulder. Stay until morning. Give me one more night. She should refuse, should send him away and finish packing. Instead, she nodded, curling closer, pretending tomorrow wouldn't come. But morning, always, and with it came a message on her phone from an unknown number. A video showing her and Damien kissing in her apartment doorway. Below it, words that made her blood freeze. Leave him, or I'll send this to all his business associates and his enemies. You'll destroy him and endanger his son. You have 24 hours. Bora. It had to be. The woman had been watching, waiting for exactly this moment. And she'd succeeded in finding the one thing that would make Sonara run. She looked at Damon, still sleeping peacefully beside her, and felt her heart shatter. She couldn't ruin his life, couldn't put Juwon in danger. No matter how much it cost her, she had to disappear. Moving carefully, she slipped from the bed and finished packing in silence. She wrote a note, brief and inadequate, saying only that she couldn't do this anymore, that it was better for everyone if she left. Nothing about love or sacrifice, or the way her heart was breaking with every word. She placed it on the pillow beside him, pressed one last kiss to his temple, and walked out of her apartment and his life. By the time Damien woke and found the note, Sonara was already gone. If this story pulled at your heartstrings, hit that subscribe button so you never miss what happens next. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and whether you think Sonara made the right choice. Your support keeps these stories coming, so show some love.